If you've ever dreamed of serving justice to someone who wronged you, hit that like button, subscribe, and get ready for one of the most satisfying revenge stories you'll hear today. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't something you plan, it's something that falls right into your lap when you least expect it. We've been married 7 years, together for 10, the kind of timeline people pointed at like proof. We met in college. He was charming in that effortless way that made professors laugh at his jokes and made strangers treat him like a friend. I was quieter, focused, the girl who color-coded her planner and worked 2 jobs while everyone else flirted through philosophy lectures. His name is Ethan Hale, and if you'd asked me a month ago, I would have told you I trusted him the way you trust gravity. Not because he was perfect, because he'd never made me doubt the ground beneath my feet. Ethan worked in marketing at a mid-sized pharmaceutical company. Polished office, polished people, polished lies. He always came home with stories, coworker drama, leadership gossip, campaign launches. He'd laugh while he talked, toss his keys into the bowl by the door, kiss my forehead like punctuation. And for years, that was enough until 3 weeks ago. It started subtly. So subtly I almost feel embarrassed admitting it now. Ethan got excited, not happy, not proud, excited in a way that didn't include me. He'd come home smiling at his phone, thumbs moving fast, like he was chasing a feeling. And when I'd ask casually with a soft smile, "What's got you so entertained?" he'd tilt the phone away without thinking and say, "Work stuff." And then he'd change the subject like he'd just closed a drawer. The first time I didn't care. Marketing people live on their phones. That's their oxygen. The second time, I noticed he started taking his phone to the bathroom. By the third time, I started doing something I hadn't done in years. I started listening, not to his words, always smooth. To the gaps between them, to how he laughed half a second too late, to how he stayed up after I went to bed, to how he stopped leaving his phone on the kitchen counter like it used to be nothing. But even then, I didn't suspect cheating. I suspected stress, a promotion, office drama, something safe. Then came the party. It was Tuesday evening. Ordinary, warm kitchen lighting, the soft sound of vegetables hitting the cutting board. I was making dinner. Pasta, roasted garlic, the kind of meal that says home without trying too hard. Ethan leaned against the counter, watching me like he had something to confess, but didn't want to use the word confess. "Hey," he said, too casual. "So, about the holiday party on Friday." I didn't look up. "What about it?" He hesitated. And that was my first real warning. "I think," he said slowly, "maybe you should skip it this year." The knife in my hand paused mid-slice. I turned my head. "Skip it?" "Yeah." He smiled like it was a favor. "It's just, it might be awkward." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. Because Ethan's company parties weren't optional in the social sense. Not if you wanted to keep being invited into the invisible circles where promotions were born. And I'd always gone every year. I'd smiled, worn the right dress, shaken the right hands, let Ethan introduce me like a trophy he'd earned, but never had to maintain. So I asked the obvious question, why would it be awkward? He scratched the back of his neck, a nervous habit I hadn't seen in a long time. "It's just that Alyssa is going to be there." That name landed like a pebble dropped into a deep well. It took a moment for the ripple to reach my brain. "Alyssa," I repeated. "You're Alyssa?" He nodded quickly. Too quickly. Ended amicably when she moved away for work. I'd never met her. I hadn't even seen a photo because Ethan had told me casually years ago. "It doesn't matter. She's just history." So, I frowned. "Okay. And, he said, forcing a laugh. "Exes at work events can just be weird. You know, I don't want any tension. I don't want you to feel uncomfortable." I blinked at him. That was almost considerate. Too considerate. "Ethan," I said slowly. "We've been married 7 years. Why would I care about an ex you dated over a decade ago?" "You wouldn't," he said quickly. Then he added, "but she might." And something in the way he said Mike made my chest go tight. He crossed his arms like he was shielding himself from the conversation. She's been acting kind of. He searched for a word that didn't sound guilty. Nostalgic lately, asking about my life, commenting on old photos on LinkedIn. I stared at him harder. So, she's flirting? No. Ethan waved a hand like it was nothing. Not like that. It's just. I can tell where it's going and I don't want drama. My instincts, the ones I trained into sharpness over years of corporate survival, whispered quietly. If it wasn't serious, he wouldn't have asked you to stay home. I set the knife down. If she's making you uncomfortable, I said, calm but firm. You should report it to HR. It's not that serious, Ethan said immediately. Too fast, too rehearsed. I just think it's easier if you're not there. He stepped closer. His voice softened, dipped into intimacy like a trap. Please, Serena, just this once. And God help me, I agreed. Like an idiot. Like a woman who thought loyalty was a shield. Sentence didn't sit right. Show my face. Like he needed to be seen by someone specific. But I swallowed it because marriage teaches you to choose peace over paranoia. What Ethan didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that for the last 2 months, I'd been keeping my own secret. 2 months earlier, a recruiter reached out to me quietly, a regional role, senior leadership at Ethan's company, regional director for operations. I didn't even tell Ethan at first because I didn't want to jinx it. I'd spent years building my career in tech consulting, mostly remote. My days full of strategy calls, data planning. Ethan didn't understand what I did beyond computer stuff, and the job market had been brutal. So, I kept my interviews private. 3 rounds with corporate, a final call with the CEO. Then the offer, I accepted. Start date, Monday, right after the holiday party, and the CEO, Richard Chen, had invited me to the party as a surprise introduction. Come Friday, he'd said warmly over the phone. Let's meet the team in a casual setting. They'll be thrilled. I hadn't told Ethan yet because I wanted to surprise him, because I thought he'd be proud. Because I thought this would be something we celebrated. I even pictured it, the way I'd walk into the party and Ethan would freeze for a second, then grin like the luckiest man alive. I imagined him bragging about me. That's my wife. I didn't realize the party wasn't a celebration waiting to happen. It was a crime scene. Friday arrived. Ethan spent 2 hours getting ready. Not unusual, but also not normal. He wore a suit I hadn't seen in months. Not for work, not for meetings. Like he was dressing for someone's attention, not corporate obligation. When he stepped out of the bedroom, he looked handsome. And that's what made it worse. Because he looked like a man preparing to be chosen. To be on a magazine cover? He laughed too loud. You're funny, he said, but his eyes didn't fully meet mine. He kissed me goodbye at the door. Longer than usual, almost like guilt. Don't wait up, he said softly. I won't, I replied, and I watched him walk away. Then I waited 1 hour. My heart wouldn't settle. My skin felt wrong, like it was bracing for impact. So, I went to the bedroom, opened my closet, and pulled out a dress. Not for revenge, not for suspicion, for clarity, because something inside me finally admitted the truth. If you have to ask your wife to stay home, it's not for her comfort, it's for yours. I got dressed. I didn't do it dramatically, just quietly, purposefully. I checked my phone. A message from Richard Chen. Car will pick you up at 8 o'clock. Looking forward to introducing you. I stared at it for a long time. Then I whispered to myself, okay. The car arrived. Hotel venue. 8:30 p.m. The party was already alive when I stepped in. Music, laughter, warm golden lights bouncing off champagne glasses. Executive table at the front. I walked toward it, heart steady, face composed. Richard saw me immediately and waved. Serena, there you are. I smiled, and that was when I saw the empty seat next to him and the woman sitting beside it. Elegant, confident, perfectly styled like she belonged in every room she entered. Richard leaned toward me, voice bright with excitement. "Come sit right here. I want you to meet Alyssa." My blood went ice cold because at that exact moment I looked across the ballroom and I saw Ethan near the bar laughing. Not the polite coworker laugh, the intimate laugh. And he was facing a woman with long dark hair, one hand resting lightly on his sleeve like she had the right, like she'd done it before, like she was home, over the chair beside him like he was presenting me with a gift. "Right here," he said, smiling. "You'll have the best view of the room." I managed to smile back. The kind of smile you learn in corporate life. The one that looks effortless while something inside you is breaking furniture. I sat. The chair felt too close to the woman on my left. Elegant, composed, the type of beauty that didn't ask for attention because it assumed it would arrive anyway. Richard leaned in, proud as if he'd orchestrated a miracle. "Serena Whitaker, meet Alyssa Grant, our newly promoted VP of Sales." "Alyssa, Serena is the person I told you about, our new regional director for operations. She starts Monday." Alyssa turned toward me with an expression that was polite first and curious second. Her eyes were sharp, appraising. Not cruel, just practiced. "Regional director," she said, extending her hand. "Impressive." Her nails were immaculate. Her grip was firm. Her smile was the kind that could sell a product and ruin a marriage. "Thank you," I said, matching her tone. And in the space between our hands touching and releasing, I felt something quiet and ugly crawl up my spine. Because Richard had said her name, because Ethan had said her name, and because across the room my husband was laughing with a woman whose hand rested on him like a claim. I kept my face still like calm was a language I spoke fluently. Inside my mind was rearranging itself. So this is Alyssa. Not a ghost story, not a relic. A living person in a fitted dress with power in her title and confidence in her posture. Richard signaled for a server. "Champagne?" he asked. "Water?" I said immediately. Alyssa laughed softly. "Smart. These parties get sloppy." Her voice was warm. Ethan hadn't seen me yet. He was near the bar with coworkers, his body angled in that familiar way men do when they're trying to be charming without looking like they're trying. And the woman beside him, her hair was dark, her posture confident, her laugh too free. She touched his forearm again, leaning close like she didn't care who saw. And my husband didn't move away. He looked younger, lighter, like he'd been waiting to be that man again. Alyssa's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it and smiled. Actually smiled like the message carried a private joke. Then she typed a reply fast and effortless without looking down much. Richard didn't notice. He was busy greeting another executive who had just walked up, but I noticed because the smile didn't belong in a business context. It belonged in a bedroom or a memory or a secret. My hands tightened around my water glass. I forced them to relax. Richard turned back toward Alyssa casual. "So," he said, "you've been back in the city 2 months now?" "Almost 3. Alyssa replied smoothly. "Seattle feels like a different life." "Still settling in?" Richard asked. Alyssa's gaze flicked across the room. Quick, precise, and I followed it instinctively. Straight to the bar. Straight to Ethan. My blood didn't just go cold. It went quiet. Richard chuckled. "Any family in town now?" Alyssa's smile sharpened. "Not family," she said. "But something promising." The phrase slid into the air like perfume. Sweet. Poisonous. Richard lifted an eyebrow, amused. "Oh," he teased. "Anyone I know?" Alyssa leaned closer like she was sharing office gossip, not dismantling my life in front of me. "Let's just say," she murmured, "I'm rekindling an old flame." I couldn't breathe. "Married." My throat tightened so hard it felt like swallowing glass. I stared at her profile, perfect makeup, calm expression, no sign of fear. She didn't know who I was. Or maybe she did and she was enjoying the moment. Richard, oblivious, chuckled again. Ah, so the guy's married. Alyssa's laugh was light, dismissive. Technically, she said, but if you ask him, it's basically done. The room didn't spin. I did internally. Basically done. I looked at Ethan again. He was laughing at something one of his co-workers said, but his eyes kept drifting back to the woman beside him like gravity. I forced my voice to work. Interesting, I said, calm as ice. Alyssa finally looked back at me. Her eyes scanned my face again. Not recognition, just curiosity. What about you, Serena? She asked. Married? Kids? For a fraction of a second, I considered lying. Saying I was too busy, too career-focused, saying I had a partner in another city. Anything to delay the crash. But something in me refused because I was done being edited out of my own story. I'm married, I said. Alyssa's smile didn't falter. Lucky man. My mouth tasted metallic. Richard clapped his hands together, cheerful. Okay, he said. We should make the rounds soon. Serena, I'll introduce you to a few department heads. He stood, motioning for us to follow. Alyssa rose gracefully. I rose, too. And the moment I stood, the room shifted, like the universe was giving me a clear path to the truth. I could have waited. I could have stayed at the executive table and kept my dignity intact. But dignity wasn't what I needed. I needed clarity, and my husband was at the bar with it. The exact instant recognition hit him. His smile collapsed. His skin drained, not pale, white, bloodless, like his body understood danger before his brain could. His drink slipped from his hand. The glass shattered on the floor. The sound cut through the music like a gunshot. Conversations around him stuttered and died. Ethan froze. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out, and the woman beside him, Alyssa, stopped mid-step. I felt her body tense. Her head turned slowly toward him. Then toward me, then back to him like she was trying to solve a puzzle that suddenly had teeth. Serena, Ethan whispered. My name sounded wrong in his mouth, too small for what he'd done. I stopped about 10 feet away, close enough to be undeniable. Alyssa's eyes narrowed. Wait, she said, voice sharp now. You know him? I didn't look at her immediately. I kept my eyes on Ethan, because I wanted him to feel the weight of being seen. Then I turned slightly, just enough to acknowledge her existence without giving her power. I don't think you've met my husband, I said calmly. Ethan flinched at the word husband. I continued, smooth and precise. Alyssa, right? Her lips parted, but she didn't answer. So, I added the lines that made the air thicken. Oh, actually, you have met him. I tilted my head as if recalling a fun fact. He was just telling me about the old flame he's been rekindling. The circle formed around us without anyone realizing it. Co-workers drifted closer, pretending to refill drinks, pretending not to listen. Someone near the DJ booth lowered the music. Just slightly. Enough. Ethan's throat bobbed. Alyssa, he said too quickly. It's not. But Alyssa wasn't looking at him anymore. She was looking at me like I was a problem she hadn't anticipated. Serena, she said slowly. When you said you were married. I smiled, the right script for the scene they're in. Alyssa took a step back, eyes flicking to Richard, who had turned at the sound of the glass shattering. Richard's smile faded. What's going on here? He asked, glancing between us. Alyssa's voice came out controlled but tense. This is Ethan, she said. And Serena is. Richard blinked. Then his face shifted into understanding that looked almost horrified. Oh, he said quietly. Ethan's eyes darted to Richard like he'd just realized the room contained consequences. I kept my voice steady. Richard, I said politely, like this was a normal introduction. I didn't expect to meet my husband's old flame tonight. The word old tasted bitter. Ethan stepped forward, hands half raised, pleading. Serena, please, this isn't what you think. Really? I asked softly. I pulled my phone from my clutch. And for a second, I saw Ethan's eyes flick to it like it was a weapon. Because it was. I stayed home, I said, my voice calm enough to terrify him. Because you told me it would be awkward with your ex here. I looked at Alyssa. But Alyssa just told Richard and me something interesting. Alyssa's jaw clenched. I turned back to Ethan. She said you told her our marriage is basically over. Ethan's face tightened. She said you've been receptive. The word hung there like smoke. Ethan shook his head. No, he said. But the denial was weak, fragile. I stepped closer, not to touch him. Just to make him feel cornered by truth. So, which is it? I asked quietly. Did you lie to me about why I couldn't come tonight, or did you lie to her about me? The silence was so heavy, I could hear someone's breath hitch behind me. Alyssa's eyes flicked to Ethan, demanding an answer. Ethan's lips trembled. And then, because the universe has a sense of timing so cruel it almost feels personal, Richard cleared at me, and he said the sentence that turned Ethan's blood to ice. Everyone, please meet our new regional director for operations, Serena Whitaker. She starts Monday. The room went dead silent. Ethan's face didn't just go pale, it collapsed, like the floor vanished under him. He stared at me like he was seeing a stranger, like the woman he'd lied to for weeks had just become the woman who could ruin his entire life with one phone call. Alyssa swallowed hard. Her eyes widened. Then she whispered, almost to herself. No. Ethan's voice came out strangled. Serena, you're. I held his gaze and gave him the calmest smile I'd ever worn in my life. Yes, I said softly. Your wife. Then I tilted my head, polite as a knife. And starting Monday, I let the pause stretch, letting everyone feel it. I'll be your boss's boss. Ethan's knees looked like they might buckle. And Alyssa. Alyssa stared at me like she'd just realized she'd been flirting with a trap. I didn't stay for the rest of the party. I told Richard there was a family emergency because there was, and he didn't question it. His expression was tight, professional, already shifting into damage control mode. Corporate instincts kick in fast when executives are involved. Ethan called my name as I walked away. Once, twice. I didn't turn around because if I did, I knew I'd either collapse or say something I could never take back, and I didn't want either. The car Richard had sent was still waiting outside. I slid into the back seat like a ghost leaving its own funeral. My hands shook the entire ride. Not from shock, from clarity. 7 years of marriage had just reorganized itself in my mind. Every memory lining up differently, like photographs flipped over to reveal captions I'd never read. I didn't go home. Like laundry detergent and safety. I slept in her guest room that night, or at least I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment Ethan's face went white. Saturday morning, the text records arrived. I hadn't expected them so fast. Apparently, my phone plan included expedited records for account holders. 3 hours. That's how long it took me to read everything. Every message, every lie, every carefully curated version of me he'd handed to another woman. 6 weeks of texts, 6 weeks of escalation, from how have you been to I still think about you to I shouldn't be saying this, but they hadn't slept together yet. That was the technical truth Ethan would later cling to like a life raft, but they had planned to. Alyssa had booked a hotel room for the following weekend. Ethan had told her he'd say he was at a work conference. The messages weren't vague. They were explicit, detailed, hungry. And then there were the messages about me. Those were worse. He complained that I was boring, that I'd let myself go, that I'd gained maybe 10 pounds and didn't dress up like I used to, that I spent weekends playing it safe instead of being fun, that I cared too much about saving money and not enough about experiences, that I was more interested in work than in him. I stared at those lines until my vision blurred. Because every single thing he complained about was something I'd done for us. I saved money because we'd talked about buying a bigger house. I worked long hours because I wanted stability before kids. I stayed home on weekends because he told me he needed space. I took up yoga and gaming and quiet hobbies because he said he felt overwhelmed by constant attention. And he took all of that, all of my effort, my compromise, my love, and turned it into ammunition. I forwarded the entire PDF to my lawyer. Yes, I already had one. I'd called her Friday night from my sister's couch. My voice. Sister's door. I didn't see him. She did. She told me later he'd been crying. Actually crying. Saying it was all a mistake. Saying he'd been confused. Saying he loved me. My sister told him to leave or she'd call the police. He left. Monday morning, I walked into my new office like my spine was made of steel. HR already knew. Corporate always knows. Alyssa had been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation into workplace conduct. Pursuing a married colleague, ethical violations, power dynamics. Ethan had called in sick. Richard pulled me aside before the department meeting. I'm sorry, he said quietly. If I'd known. You couldn't have, I replied. And I meant it. I appreciate the support. He nodded. We're documenting everything. This isn't the culture we tolerate. The meeting itself was tense. People were polite, professional, but I could feel the curiosity buzzing under the surface like static. By Tuesday, Ethan had sent over 100 messages. Apologies, excuses, declarations of love, promises of therapy. I blocked his number. All communication went through my lawyer. Wednesday, Alyssa was terminated. Not because of the affair, because during the investigation, they uncovered falsified expense reports. Personal travel billed to corporate. The affair had just triggered the deep dive. She called me that night from an unknown number. She was drunk. She blamed me, said I'd ruined her life. I recorded the call and sent it to my lawyer. Thursday, I filed for divorce. Friday, 1 week after the party, Ethan showed up at my office. Security called me before letting him up. I told them not to. He waited in the parking lot for 3 hours, because you asked me to. He sobbed. I know, he said. I know that now. You told her our marriage was over, I replied. You planned to cheat on me. You mocked my body, my hobbies, my values. I'll do anything, he said. Therapy, counseling, whatever you want. I opened my car door. I want a divorce, I said. And I want you to stop showing up where I am. I paused, then added, next time, I'll file for a restraining order. I drove away without looking back. 3 weeks passed. Not quietly, just steadily, like my life was recalibrating itself, one decision at a time. The divorce moved faster than I expected. Fault-based, clean. My lawyer barely had to argue. 6 weeks of explicit messages, hotel reservations, and recorded calls don't leave much room for interpretation. Ethan tried. That's the word I use now. He tried to bargain, tried to apologize, tried to reframe betrayal as a moment of weakness. His lawyer floated the idea of reconciliation mediation. Mine shut it down in one email. Attached, Exhibit A through Z. Ethan moved back into his parents' house. His mother called me 2 days later. She cried. She apologized. She said she didn't raise her son to treat a woman like that. I thanked her because kindness doesn't cost me anything, but it didn't change my answer. Alyssa disappeared from the building. Officially, she'd been terminated. Unofficially, the rumor mill said she was moving back west. Apparently, her ex-husband found out why she'd been fired. Custody lawyers got involved. Visitation was suspended pending review. Turns out betrayal doesn't exist in isolation. It spreads. I ran into one of Ethan's co-workers at a coffee shop a week later. She looked uncomfortable. "I'm sorry," she said, knowing I'd been the last to see my own marriage clearly. 2 months after the party, the divorce was finalized. Ethan didn't contest it. He signed everything. I kept the house. He kept his car and half the savings. I didn't fight it. I didn't need to. A week later, a letter arrived at my office, handwritten, from Ethan. I almost threw it away, but curiosity won. He apologized. He said therapy helped him realize he'd been chasing validation instead of communication. He said Alyssa had love-bombed him with attention and promises. He said he hoped I found someone who appreciated me. I folded the letter and filed it away. Maybe someday it'll matter. Right now, it doesn't. Work is good. I joined a gym, not because of what he said, but because I wanted to. I'm dating lightly, carefully, on my terms. Richard mentioned a VP track if I keep performing. Sometimes I think about the moment at the party, the exact second Ethan realized the lie he'd built couldn't hold. It wasn't revenge. It was truth. And truth, when it finally arrives, doesn't need to shout. It just stands there undeniable. The moment Ethan's face went white when Richard announced I was his new boss was the climax of this story. The glass shattering on the floor, the sudden silence in the room, the way Alyssa's confident smile faltered. It all created this perfect storm of public humiliation for both of them. But the real satisfaction came when I said, "And starting Monday, I'll be your boss's boss." That was the moment the power dynamic shifted completely. Ethan, who had tried to control me by excluding me from the party, suddenly found himself in a position where I would have direct authority over his career. Alyssa, who had been so confident that Ethan's marriage was basically over, realized she had been flirting with her future subordinate's wife. The best part? I didn't have to plan any of it. The universe simply aligned the pieces, and I was waiting for me. Looking back, I realized that the most satisfying revenge isn't always something you orchestrate. Sometimes, it's about being in the right place at the right time, with the truth on your side. What happened at that party wasn't about me getting back at Ethan or Alyssa, it was about truth finally coming to light in the most public way possible. I've learned that when someone betrays you, they create the conditions for their own downfall. All you have to do is keep moving forward, focus on yourself, and be ready when the universe hands you your moment. The most powerful form of revenge isn't about hurting someone who hurt you, it's about becoming so successful, so confident, so unshakable that their betrayal becomes just a footnote in your story. The silence in the car was a physical thing, a thick, heavy blanket that muffled the city lights blurring past the tinted windows. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel the urge to. There was a hollow space inside my chest where a 7-year-old marriage used to be, and in that hollow space, a cold, clear fire was beginning to burn. It wasn't a fire of rage, not yet. It was the fire of a forge, where something old and broken is melted down so that something new and strong can be forged in its place. The driver, a professional, didn't ask questions. He just drove, his eyes on the road, giving me the silent grace of a stranger who understands that some wounds are too fresh for words. I leaned my head against the cool glass of the window and watched my reflection, a pale, composed woman I barely recognized. That woman had just walked into a war she didn't know she was fighting and had walked out the victor without raising a single weapon. The weapon had been handed to her. When the car pulled up to my sister Chloe's small, tidy house with its welcoming porch light, I felt the first crack in my composure. I fumbled with my clutch, my fingers clumsy and numb. Before I could even find my keys, the front door swung. Open. Chloe stood there in her pajamas, a mug of tea in her hand, her expression a mixture of fierce love and quiet fury. She didn't say a word. She just set the mug down, opened her arms wide, and let me fall into them. The hug was so tight, so real, it was like being anchored to the earth after floating in zero gravity. I breathed in the scent of her laundry detergent and the faint, comforting smell of her dog, and for the first time that night, I let myself feel the tremor that had been threatening to break me all evening. She let me inside, sat me on her sofa, wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, and pressed the warm mug into my hands. "Okay," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "Start at the beginning." And so I did. I told her everything, from the first subtle shift in Ethan's behavior to the carefully rehearsed line about the party, to the shocking revelation at the CEO's table. As I spoke, the events of the night solidified in my mind, no longer a chaotic blur of shock and betrayal, but a clear, linear narrative of his deception and my accidental, perfect justice. When I got to the part where I said, "I'll be your boss's boss," Chloe let out a short, sharp laugh that was half sob, half triumph. "Oh, Serena," she whispered, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "You magnificent woman." I slept in her guest room that night, but sleep was a distant country. I lay there in the dark, the pattern of the floral wallpaper imprinted on the backs of my eyelids, and I replayed the look on Ethan's face. It wasn't just panic. It was the dawning horror of a man who had built a house of cards and had just realized a hurricane was standing in the room with him. The next morning, the world felt different. The sunlight streaming through Chloe's kitchen window didn't feel warm, it felt revealing, like it was illuminating all the dusty corners of my life that I had ignored for too long. While Chloe made coffee, I opened my laptop and navigated to my mobile carrier's website. My hands were steady now, my movements purposeful. I requested the full text message and call log records for Ethan's line, a line that was on our family plan, a plan I had set up and managed. I paid the expedited fee, my jaw set. The confirmation email said the records would be available within 3 hours. Those 3 hours were the longest of my life. Chloe and I didn't talk much. She just sat with me, her presence a silent anchor, as I stared at the clock, watching the minutes crawl by. When the email finally arrived, my heart hammered against my ribs. I clicked the link, and a 47-page PDF document loaded onto my screen. And there it was. The entire sordid affair, documented in black and white. I started at the beginning, 6 weeks ago. The first message from Alyssa's number, a simple, "Hey Ethan, it's Alyssa Grant. Remember me? Saw your profile on LinkedIn, looks like you're doing great." His reply came 10 minutes later. "Alyssa. Wow, blast from the past. Of course I remember you. How have you been?" I read through their entire conversation, a slow, sickening descent into emotional betrayal. It started innocently enough, catching up on careers, cities, mutual acquaintances. But then it shifted. "I still think about that summer in the cabin," she wrote. "Me too," he replied. "Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if you hadn't moved." The messages became more frequent, more intimate. They shared inside jokes I'd never heard. They reminisced about dates I wasn't on. And then, the worst part. The messages about me. "Serena's great," he wrote, "but she's just so settled, you know? We're in a routine. It's comfortable, but the spark is gone." Another one, "She's been so focused on work lately. I feel like I'm No! I miss us." I read that line over and over, the words burning into my retinas. The yoga pants I wore because my back hurt from sitting at a desk all day, trying to build a career for our future. The savings account I was diligently filling because he had told me he dreamed of buying a house with a big backyard. The fun I had stopped having because he had complained he was too tired from work to go out. He had taken my love, my compromise, my sacrifice, and twisted it into a narrative that made me the villain of his boring life, a story he was telling another woman to make himself feel like the victim, to justify his wandering eye. And then I saw it. The plan. A message from Alyssa from 3 days ago. "I've booked a suite at the Grand Meridian for next Friday. The one with the city view." And his reply, "I'll tell Serena I have to go to a last-minute conference in Chicago. I'll be there all night. They hadn't slept together yet. That was the flimsy technicality he would cling to, the lie he would tell himself to soften the blow. But they had planned it. In detail. They had chosen the hotel, the room, the lie. It was no longer an emotional affair, it was a conspiracy. I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. There was no more doubt, no more room for his excuses. I forwarded the entire 47-page document to the divorce lawyer I had found online late the night before, a woman whose website promised aggressive, discreet representation. Then I closed my laptop and looked at Chloe. "It's worse than I thought," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "It's all there." She just nodded, her face grim. "What do you need?" she asked. "I need to get my things," I said. "And I need him to be gone when I do." That afternoon, I called Ethan. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. My voice was flat, cold, and businesslike. "I'm coming to the house to get some clothes and my essentials," I said. "Serena, please, just let me explain." It was a stupid mistake, it meant nothing. A 6-week-long, premeditated mistake that included booking a hotel room for next Friday? I replied, my voice dangerously quiet. "That doesn't sound like nothing to me. Be gone in 1 hour." I hung up before he could respond. Chloe drove me, following a few minutes behind in her car, just in case. When I walked into our house, the home I had lovingly curated for 7 years, it felt like a stranger's house. Every piece of furniture, every photo on the wall, felt like a prop in a play where I had been the unwitting fool. I walked into our bedroom and the first thing I saw was the suit he had worn to the party, draped over a chair like a discarded skin. I felt a wave of nausea. I didn't hesitate. I walked to the closet, pulled out a large suitcase, and began to pack. I didn't take my time. I took my clothes, my shoes, my toiletries, my laptop, and the box of old photo albums from the top of the wardrobe. I didn't look at the photos. I just packed them. As I was zipping up the suitcase, my phone buzzed. It was Ethan. "Please don't do this," he begged, his voice thick with tears. "I love you." I was an idiot. I was confused. "You weren't confused, Ethan," I said, my voice breaking for the first time. "You were deceitful. You were cruel. You took my trust and you used it to line your nest with someone else. Don't ever call me again." I blocked his number. As I was walking out of the bedroom, carrying the heavy suitcase, I saw it on his nightstand. His phone. He had left it behind in his haste. A dark, tempting thought flickered through my mind. I ignored it. I didn't need his phone. I had everything I needed. I walked out of that house and didn't look back. Monday morning arrived, crisp and cold. But forged. I walked into the headquarters of Ethan's company, my company now, with my head held high. The atmosphere was electric with unspoken gossip. Eyes followed me as I walked to the elevators, but no one said a word. I was introduced to my team, a group of sharp, capable professionals who sized me up with a mixture of curiosity and respect. I spent the day in back-to-back meetings, immersing myself in the operational challenges of my new role. It was a welcome distraction, a world of logic and strategy where feelings were secondary to results. I learned that Ethan had called in sick, and that Alyssa had been placed on administrative leave pending an HR investigation. The corporate machine was already grinding away, dissecting the fallout from Friday night. Richard Chen, the CEO, stopped by my office in the late afternoon. He closed the door behind him, his expression grave. "Serena," he began, "I want to reiterate my sincerest apologies. We have a zero-tolerance policy for this kind of behavior. The investigation is already underway, and I can assure you, it will be thorough." "Thank you, Richard," I said, my voice professional. "I appreciate your support. I'm here to do a job, and I intend to do it well." He nodded, a flicker of admiration in his eyes. "I have no doubt." The next few weeks were a blur of activity and emotional whiplash. Ethan's pleas shifted from my blocked phone number to my email, then to my lawyer's office. He sent long, rambling apologies, then angry accusations blaming me for not being present enough, then desperate promises of therapy and change. I didn't read a single one. My lawyer handled it all, her responses brief and to the point. Alyssa's downfall was swift and brutal. The HR investigation into the affair quickly uncovered a trail of financial improprieties. She had been using her corporate credit card for personal travel, expensive dinners, and luxury shopping, cleverly disguised as client entertainment. The affair had been the spark that lit the fuse, but the fraud was the bomb that destroyed her career. She was terminated for cause, a black mark that would follow her for the rest of her professional life. I heard through the corporate grapevine that her ex-husband had used her termination to launch a legal battle for full custody of their children. The web of lies she had woven had ensnared her completely. The divorce, to my surprise, was almost anticlimactic. My lawyer presented the 47-page PDF, the recorded drunken phone call Alyssa had made to me, and the testimony of Richard Chen. Ethan's lawyer took one look at the mountain of irrefutable evidence and advised his client to settle. He signed everything. I kept the house. He kept his car and his half of our savings. I didn't fight him on it. The money was tainted. I didn't want it. I just wanted him gone. About a month after it was all over, a handwritten letter arrived at my office. The return address was his parents' house. I almost threw it away, but a morbid sense of curiosity made me open it. It was a long, rambling apology. He wrote about his insecurities, his midlife crisis, his pathetic need for validation. He claimed Alyssa had love-bombed him, a term he must have learned in therapy, and that he had been swept up in the attention. He ended the letter by saying he hoped I could the spark that lit the fuse, but the fraud was the bomb that destroyed her career. She was terminated for cause, a black mark that would follow her for the rest of her professional life. I heard through the corporate grapevine that her ex-husband had used her termination to launch a legal battle for full custody of their children. The web of lies she had woven had ensnared her completely. The divorce, to my surprise, was almost anticlimactic. My lawyer presented the 47-page PDF, the recorded drunken phone call Alyssa had made to me, and the testimony of Richard Chen. Ethan's lawyer took one look at the mountain of irrefutable evidence and advised his client to settle. He signed everything. I kept the house. He kept his car and his half of our savings. I didn't fight him on it. The money was tainted. I didn't want it. I just wanted him gone. About a month after it was all over, a handwritten letter arrived at my office. The return address was his parents' house. I almost threw it away, but a morbid sense of curiosity made me open it. It was a long, rambling apology. He wrote about his insecurities, his midlife crisis, his pathetic need for validation. He claimed Alyssa had love-bombed him, a term he must have learned in therapy, and that he had been swept up in the attention. He ended the letter by saying he hoped I could strength of the mountains. I started dating again, cautiously, with men who were interested in my mind as much as my appearance, who listened when I spoke. I ran into one of Ethan's former co-workers, a woman named Jessica, at a coffee shop near the office. She looked nervous to see me. "Serena," she said, "I'm so sorry. I feel terrible. We all kind of knew something was going on, but we didn't know how to say anything." "It's okay, Jessica," I said, and I was surprised to find that I meant it. "You couldn't have known. It was just so obvious," she continued, her voice low. "The long lunches, the way she'd touch his arm, the inside jokes. He was different around her. Lighter. We all just assumed, well, we assumed you knew and that it was some kind of open arrangement." I smiled, a real, genuine smile. It didn't hurt to hear it. It just confirmed what I already knew. I had been the last one to see the truth because I had been the only one truly living in it. I had been the only one who believed in the lie. Sometimes, on a quiet evening, I'll think back to that party, to the shattering glass, the silent room, the look of pure, unadulterated shock on Ethan's face. It wasn't revenge, not in the way people usually mean it. It wasn't a calculated plan to inflict pain. It was something far more powerful. It was consequence. It was the universe, in its own strange and poetic way, righting a wrong. It was truth, arriving not with a shout, but with the quiet, undeniable force of a tidal wave, washing away the lies and leaving only the clean, solid ground of reality beneath my feet. And on that ground, I was finally free to build something new. Not a house, not a marriage, but a life. A life that was, for the first time, entirely, unapologetically, my own. They say that the best revenge is living well, and for a long time, I thought that was just something people said to make themselves feel better. But I've learned it's true. The most from seeing Ethan and Alyssa humiliated, though there was a certain justice in that. The true, lasting peace came from realizing that their betrayal wasn't a reflection of my worth, but a revelation of their character. It was the key that unlocked a door I didn't even know was there, a door that led to a life of my own making. I didn't need to plan my revenge. I just needed to plan my future. And in doing so, I became the person I was always meant to be. Strong, self-reliant, and completely in control of my own story. The fire that started that night didn't destroy me, it purified me, burning away the parts of my life that were no longer serving me, leaving only what was real, and strong, and true. If Serena's journey from betrayal to self-empowerment resonated with you, let us know in the comments. Have you ever witnessed a moment of karma so perfect it felt like it was written in a script? And if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button and tap the notification bell. Because here, we believe in the power of truth, the strength it takes to walk through fire, and the incredible satisfaction of watching justice unfold. Until next time, remember your worth, trust your instincts, and never be afraid to show up to a party you weren't invited to. You never know who you might end up being the boss of.